All right, so I need a breath. Let's all take a breath. Thank you, Lord, for what remains a beautiful morning. And would ask that you would still my heart and that you would still all of our hearts. That we want to meet you in this moment. Oh, we gather to sing and gather to be together with one another. But most of all, may we gather to learn and be more like you. Oh Lord, it is our fervent prayer that we would attune our ears to your voice. Even if no one hears a word that I say, may they hear your voice. God, help us not just to watch life, but to step into it and to make life happen. We are thankful, Jesus, that you stepped into human history, that you showed us what it was and is to be the way, the truth, and the life, and that you will, in our story, soon be remembering the ultimate sacrifice that you gave for us. And we trust that you are here to make these minutes into moments. And we ask this in your name. Amen. All right, so here we go. So we've been diving into the past couple of weeks into what I've been calling the Foundations for Living. Wow, what an audacious title for a sermon series. And specifically looking at how to turn minutes into moments, how to identify those defining moments in our life and step into them in such a way that in stepping into them, we will find the momentum for life and what Jesus calls the abundant life. And we've been going, for me and for us, unusually slow in this story of Saul and his son Jonathan, king and prince. It's a moment where they are facing, they meaning what remnant of a fighting group of Israel is facing the Philistine army, and it's overwhelming. The conflict has been building. There's this ominous moment where Saul comes to understand that they don't have a chance. They don't have a chance in the logical realm. And that's Saul's thinking. Remember, he was the first king of Israel, and God said, you don't want a king? And Israel's like, yeah, we want one, so they get Saul. And he had the shortcomings that all of us as human beings have. Saul decides, no, not going to happen, and he's just going to let life happen. So he decides to take a nap, right? We've talked about that. You know, he says, no, I'm going to go to sleep, take a little nappy nap. Now, in the middle of the night, Jonathan is awakened. We don't know whether he had a dream, had a premonition, heard a voice, but all we know is that upon awakening, he says to his armor bearer, who we're referring to as Doug, because I think he deserves a name. So Jonathan says to Doug, let's go pick a fight. And this is the moment that we've stepped into, that where we see two people, father and son, king and prince. Two people can be in the same moment and come out of it with two completely different futures. Could have happened in your life. There could have been moments or minutes in your life that you thought were mundane, that you thought were meaningless, that you thought were empty and void of anything significant, but someone else was there. And for them, it was a moment of opportunity and a moment of possibility. So dare I say that the great danger in life is to watch life happen rather than to make it happen. And so there we see a TV screen, but could be that kind of a screen, could be this kind of a screen, it could be any number of things, that the danger in life is to watch it go by rather than to engage in it. So this morning I want to talk to us about living before dying. Now, in that grand scheme of life. We're either going to live a life, as Gina said, a life of risk, or face the future when we come close to taking our final breath. Oh, I wish I had. Or the if onlys, the regrets. And so we pick up here from 1 Samuel 14, verse 8. It says, so as Lisa read for us. So Jonathan says to Doug, the armor bearer, come on, let's get going. Let's cross over towards them, and we're going to let them see us. And if they say to us, upon seeing us, wait there until we come to you. In other words, the Philistines are going to say, wait until we come to you, then we're going to stay here. And we're not going to go up and fight them. What if they say, come up to us, we will climb up to them. Remember, they're between two cliffs. And that'll be our sign that the Lord is giving them into our hands. Now, this is right before when Jonathan, when he wakes up Doug, says to him, let's go pick a fight. Maybe God will help. Translation as best we have it. Now, that's not the most inspiring speech I've ever heard. It's not like Braveheart, where it's like, courage, or Churchill, we shall never give up. Because if you're going to fight, if you're going to go to fight with an army that they metaphorically, I'm sure, say that the odds felt like 10,000 to 1 against you, you had better pretty well be assured of God's help. And so if you are Doug, the armor bearer, and you're hearing this as a motivational speech, let's go pick a fight. Maybe God will help us. I think I'd say, hey, you know what? Why don't we just go back to sleep? Wake me up when you're sure God's going to be there. Now, it's not bad enough that Jonathan isn't sure if God's actually going to help them, but this is one of the worst military strategies that could be imagined. You don't have to be steeped in what Patton did or Eisenhower or Churchill to know that what Jonathan is suggesting is just patently a bad idea. Jonathan says, come on, and we're going to cross over toward them and let them see us. That's terrible strategy. See, I think even if Doug was an inexperienced warrior, he'd say, I don't think that's a good idea. I think that we should not let them see us. I think we should go under the cover of darkness and stay out of their sight. Let's sort of sneak up on them and try not to let them see us. Try not to let them hear us. How about we not even let them know that we're there? We might live a little longer. What do you mean? Let's let them see us clearly. But see, Jonathan is thinking about this in a very different fashion. He's coming from a different framework. Jonathan understood that what he was about to undertake, he couldn't do on his own strength. He knew that this journey wasn't a journey he could take alone. And so as I reflect on this, and as Gina too, there are places you can go in your life that you can go without God and hope to succeed. But there's a life waiting for you that you can't dive into, you can't step into, you can't move into without God in your life and hope to succeed. Jonathan says, let's step across this line and let's let them see us. So friends, there has to come a point in your life where you decide if you will step out of invisibility and step into visibility. I think a lot of us, it feels better to be invisible. Because when you're invisible, you're safe. It's secure, it's comfortable. When you're invisible, no one really knows everything about you, and because of that, they might like everything they know about you. And when you're invisible, no one really knows what motivates you, drives you, fuels you. And when you're invisible, people can have all kinds of impressions of who you are. that have nothing to do with who you actually are. So I think it's clear that some of us have found this comfort of invisibility throughout our lives. Call it anonymity, whatever you want to call it. Invisibility feels like a warm blanket on a cool evening. It's when you become visible that you become a problem. It's when you become visible that you get criticized. It's when you become visible that you receive critique. It's when you become visible that judgment comes. and some of you are and may be among the most amazing people. And people look at you like, oh, they're just awesome. You know, he's such a great guy. She's so amazing. She's such a hard worker. She has such integrity. And they know everything about you that you want to let them know. But they don't realize that you're actually still invisible because they don't know why you're so awesome, right? There are places in the world, some of you would know this, people go just because they want to post on Instagram. You know, they're called Instagram places because, you know, that's where the people want to go. But I think we all know that the Instagram life is not really reality. There's some of you who have been invisible with your faith. And so people see you and they think, wow, you're amazing, you're wonderful, you're incredible. But you've remained invisible about the source of your life. So Jonathan says we're gonna step out. We're gonna let them see us. We are gonna go beyond the point of no return. We're gonna step into this uncomfortable place, this uncomfortable space where people are gonna see us. And if God doesn't show up, we're done. So some of us who have been United Methodists for, 20, 30 years now, would remember that the United Methodists had a very vocal leader as a bishop, Bishop Sprague, Bishop Joe Sprague, wonderful bishop, wonderful preacher, and he really was the vanguard against gambling in our area. He took a strong stance on it, and we as clergy picked up on that strength, picked up on that energy. We came out of hiding and became visible. I became very vocal about it. I was serving the church over in Antioch at that time. Antioch was one of those communities where they were vying for that final riverboat casino. And so there was a lot of machinations that were taking place. One of the things that took place was that the bank in town was going to serve as an overnight depository. They'd figured this all out. It was going to serve as an overnight depository for the money. And so while it wouldn't seem like much if you get, 5% of your money for a year, and you divide that by 365, it's like that's a really small percentage. But when you're dealing with millions and millions of dollars, that adds up. And so, as I became vocal with that, I was also trying to join Rotary. Now, I had a special membership with Rotary. It's called Paul Harris Fellow. It's like really an honor. And when you apply to be a Rotarian, if you're a Paul Harris Fellow, they just like, well, you're in. You're in unless the owner of the bank is the one of three who have the ability to blackball your membership. So guess who did not become a member of Rotary? Moi. Probably the only Rotarian in history to be blackballed by a Rotary club. Certainly not the only Methodist to ever receive a couple of letters that threatened my life. I'm sure there are many others. We didn't take them as serious, but when you step out of invisibility into visibility, you risk that, right? Now, I know that some of you think I have a reputation as a risk taker, but I want to let you know that really I have the genetic makeup of a coward. That whatever DNA for fear is, I was pretty sure I have it, and at least had it. That whatever's happened and transpired over the 70 years of my life, it's not because I began like that, because when I was a kid, I was your stereotypical fraidy cat. You know, I thought there was a genetic makeup for heroes, for courage, for nobility, for people who were made out of a different material than I was. I mean, there was a John Stump, and he was tough, and he would stand up for whatever. And then there was a John Stump and a Tom Jury, and and these were guys. I was like, wow, look at them. I mean, I am not cut from the same cloth, as them. And so fear paralyzed my life. Fear actually sent me in. The only overnight I've had in the hospital. Fear sent me into the hospital for a short time. If I had to guess, I think some of you here know from whence I speak, that feeling of being paralyzed by fear. And dare I say, if you continue to choose it, it's very possible that as your window on this life winds down, you may look back, and have some regrets because you chose not to take a risk. And for a huge part of us, I do think that the language of faith has betrayed us, because somewhere along the line, we came up with this understanding that faith equals security. Right? We thought that faith would give us security, that faith would protect us, that faith would make us safe, when in fact faith is not synonymous with certainty. Faith is equivalent to uncertainty. You see, faith doesn't make life predictable, right? Faith makes life adventurous. Faith doesn't remove all the possibilities of danger. Faith doesn't remove the danger. Faith makes you dangerous. So if you're going to step into the moments that God has for you, you have to decide, I don't want to live a life of regret. I'm going to choose a life of risk. I'm going to let them see me. I'm going to come out. I'm going to cross the line of faith. I'm going to step out of the invisible into the visible. We sing, hide it under a bushel. No. But so often, that's where our faith is. It's hidden under the bushel. And in your hiding, when something hasn't gone well in your life, maybe you wonder, well, where's God? Well, God's like, well, you're invisible. Maybe I'll join you in your invisibility. So I grew up in Belvedere. Many of you know that. And many of you have heard a couple of my swimming stories there, but there's yet another. Belvedere Pool. I actually went online to see if there was a picture of it, because I think it's no longer there. I think it was old when I was a kid, probably built by the WPA. But it was your typical community, what then was. Now the swimming pools are like carnival. I mean, they're huge, they're wild, they've got tubes. This was a simple pool. Pool, shallow end, down, deep end, low diving board, high diving board. I was genetically predisposed for the low diving board. I was a low dive boy. Anybody else here like the low dive? Yeah, all right. And the great thing about the low dive was there was never a line. Right? See, everyone else they wanted to be the high dive people. There was just one or two of us cowards, right? So I got to jump off the low dive as many times as I wanted to. I go home and say, I just jumped in like 15, 20 times. All these other kids would be pushing their way up, up the ladder, climbing up to the high dive. I didn't need that. I was above that. I was too mature, to need that kind of rush in my life. So I would just sit in the pool watching the kids go off the high dive. I didn't need that. Nope, not good for me. I'm good. I'm good with the low dive life. But pretty soon my friends realized I was afraid, so they began to harass me. They began to compel me, to try and shame me out of my fear. Well, fear, it's powerful. and you can bring all the shame on me that you want. But if I'm afraid, I'm not doing it. So I watched those kids jump one after the other, kids older than me, kids younger than me, kids that had barely been born, nursing children, jumping off the high dive, And I'm just like, I had all the empirical data I needed that I could do that. I could live to do it. I could live. But see, fear is irrational. It's not grounded in reason, is it? So one day, I don't know what happened. More shame than I could handle, perhaps. More opportunity, more data, all of that funneled together. I said, I'm going to do it. Right? I'm going to go off the high dive. So I remember getting in the line. It was a slow line. Maybe you've been in a slow line too, where you thought, I really shouldn't be doing this. I have that vivid memory of Space Mountain down in Disney World. I thought, it says right there, people prone to motion sickness should not do. I said, that's me. And they didn't have like one sign. They had, if I remember right, like 10 signs. I passed each one going, that's me. That's me. That's me. It made it all the worse. See, if I could have just walked fast into Space Mountain, it would have been good. And if I could have just walked up to the high dive, then had all those opportunities to think, oh, boy, I shouldn't be here. I shouldn't be here. So pretty soon I find myself at the ladder. Okay, now I'm up. I've got my face in some kid's butt. Pretty soon some kid's got his face in my butt. And there's no turning back, right? There is no turning back. But I wanted now more than ever to turn back. But it's like there's momentum. You're going up to the very top. And I got to that very last step, and I grabbed the handle. Some of you have been up there. And I looked, and all I saw was concrete, on both sides. And I thought, I'm going to be the first person who dies because he looked over and he fell on the concrete. There was just a skinny little platform. And my brother has said, whatever you do, don't look down. Just walk off. But I made the mistake. I looked down. And from down here, it looked high. But from up there, it looked like 5 times as high. So I've decided I am not going to go down. So I'm like, I don't care that the whole ladder is full. I'm going to push these kids out of my way. I'm going to be polite. I'm going to say, excuse me. I'm just going to force my way back down. But what I forgot was that the meanest, cruelest, most unforgiving, unempathetic person on the planet was right behind me. My brother. And he said, you ain't going this way. My brother was bigger than me, even though he always called me little brother, even though eventually I was bigger than him. I said, move out of my way, I'm going down. He said, no, you're not coming back this way. And I got so angry. He didn't know my pain. He didn't understand my fear. So finally, I walked out to the edge, took that step off, and in all my mind, I was like, see, they tell you to hold your nose. They tell you to, when to breathe at the last second. And they're jump, and finally, out of sheer shame, I jumped, and I popped up. I thought I'm no longer a low dive person. I'm a high dive. See, we're called to be high dive people. So Jonathan, he tells Doug his brilliant strategy, going past the no return, saying, let them see us. In verse 9, he says, if they say to us, wait here until we come to you, we'll stay right where we are. And we're not going to go up to them. In other words, when the Philistines see us, if they see us and say, wait here, we're going to come to you. Well, we're going to stand right here. And we're going to die. Because that's a sign that things are not going to go well. And then he says, but if they say, come up to us, we'll climb up, because that'll be the sign that the Lord has given them into our hands. See, they're walking between two cliffs. Remember, the Philistines are on the top of the cliff. That's the high ground. That's the good ground. That's the military strategy. And militarily, you would say, wait for them to come down. Because as they're climbing down, the Philistines, well, they can't use their swords, and that would just be such a better approach. But Jonathan says, if they say to us, stay where we are, we're just going to stay here and we're going to die like men. Die like a man. Die like men. But Jonathan says, if they say come up to us, that's going to be our sign. We're going to be high dive people. We're going to take the cliff, because then we'll know that God has given us the victory. So what do? The Philistines say, come on up. So they do. And it says that they use their hands and their feet. What a strange thing to put in there. Well, what did they think they were going to climb with? Their upper lip or something? So finally they reach just to the top, and the Philistine outposts, those that were looking, probably the biggest, ready to take on whoever comes, says, come over here, you Hebrew dogs. We're going to teach you a lesson. Fight or flight sets in, I'm sure, but at that point, it was all about the fight. You kind of run for life, and Jonathan goes, can you feel it? These really large Philistines are calling you to come over here, and we're going to kill you. It just makes no sense. But Jonathan had what I would call an advanced mentality. It was do or die. It was, or get off the pot, right, So once you decide to live a life of risk rather than regret, you have to advance. Your mind changes about the way God works in your life. You need to assume that you have a green light unless you get a red. Now, that's true for us as individuals, but it is also true for churches. Sometimes churches have a way of just like they're very hesitant about what they try or what they do. We had a church council meeting this week, and I told them a story about a guy named Bill at seminary. I was doing my work, my service, you might say, one of my classes as a chaplain at a women's federal penitentiary right outside Lexington there. But Bill was appointed to a church. He had a church that he was serving, and so every week in this group we would go around. We'd tell our different stories, tell what had taken place in our setting, and we'd have some reflection and input and probing questions for one another. And it seemed like every week or two, Bill would mention, oh, well, we tried this, we're doing this next week, we're doing this. And so I thought, wow, man, Bill, that's awesome. You must have some really large church, that you're serving. And so one time I asked him, because I thought, wow, what size church, are you serving? And I think he says like 40. I'm like, I said, well, how are you doing all these things? He said, well, most of them don't work. And I've always remembered that, because churches are so risk averse. They're worried about, well, what if it doesn't work? And I'm like, okay, it doesn't work. But then we get invested with different things. But Bill's word has always stuck with me. See, God has already given us a yes, a big yes. In fact, that's what Jesus told his earliest followers, right? Go. Go, therefore. He really wasn't specific. He said, just go take over the entire planet. Start wherever you want. Just go. Keep going until you've transformed the course of human history. God's big sign is a yes. Okay, but what am I supposed to do? Philippians chapter 4. Well, I'm going to go. What am I going to do? Well, Paul answers that question. He said, what should you think about? What should you let your mind do? He says, finally, sisters and brothers, do whatever is true, whatever is noble, whatever is right, whatever is pure, whatever is lovely, whatever is admirable. If there is anything that's excellent or praiseworthy, think about these things. So my walk with the dog is, keep that up there for a second. My walk with the dog Saturday night is always different. I've got one standard one throughout the week, but then Saturday night I walk the neighborhood, kind of pray, and every Saturday night now, this house doesn't have curtains in it. Every Saturday night, because I go by about the same time, they're watching MMA fighting with their kids. Mixed martial arts. Sorry about that. You know, bare knuckle, you know, like no box, you know, no gloves, no nothing. It's just like who can make the other pass out or tap out first. And having just thought about this, if there's anything excellent, anything admirable, lovely, right, pure, noble, or true, think about these things. And I'm thinking, wow, how different it is to just sit and watch people beat the living out of each other. But we have ours as well, I'm sure, right? Okay, I don't want to cast stones, live in a glass house. It's just what should I think about? You know, where, and man, there's a lot to unpack there. He says, whatever's true, whatever's noble, whatever's right, whatever's lovely, think about these things. Whatever you want. Anything that's beautiful, anything that's true, anything that's good. Think about these things. And folks, even those of us who understand ourselves to be progressive, you know, we can find ourselves just dragged down. Now, if you're being dragged down, think about what Paul is saying to us. How much other than what is true and noble and good and excellent are you allowing in to your life? See, when you step into a relationship with God, your imagination has permission to expand. Violence and hatred and racism and jealousy and envy and greed, that's all done. There's nothing creative about that. Yeah. You want to be like everyone else? Choose that path. That's the easiest path for human beings to take. And it'll make you a small human being. Do you know how many things are true? So many things. Just pick a truth and think about this. You know how many things are noble, pure, how many things are lovely? Just pick a lovely thing. Think about a beautiful thing and create it. What should I do with my life? Create something beautiful. I admire so many people, and I want to think about them. See, my imagination can run wild for all of eternity thinking about that which is admirable and lovely and pure and right and noble and true. Yeah, okay, Pastor, that's what you're supposed to think. What am I supposed to do? Glad you asked, because he continues in the next verse. Whatever you've learned or received or heard from me or seen in me, do it. That's what you're supposed to do. He doesn't even give them a specific do. Here's how free you are. He says, pick a whatever. Now, if you're choosing between good and evil, choose good. If you're choosing between right and wrong, choose right. If you're choosing between hatred and love, choose love. Bitterness and forgiveness, choose forgiveness. If you're choosing between despair and hope, choose hope. See, this is how it works. Pick a good thing and do it. Unless you get a no. So I was a relatively new pastor at my first church, the Reynolds United Methodist Church, and the kids decided they wanted to go skiing. Well, I don't think I'd ever skied in my life prior to that, and so we had up to Mount Horeb, I think, is the name up in Wisconsin. It's a pretty good drive from down where we were, and so I admitted to the guy selling the skis. I'd never been on skis before. You know, I don't know how you put these things on. And he said, well, you for sure should go take this little introductory class. And so I went and took this. You know, basically it was, you know, how to stop. That's all it was, you know. Because I figured the mountain would help me go. So all I needed to figure out was how to stop. You know, you kind of like do this and you snow plow. And so Dean, one of the kids there, said, he said, come on, Pastor Kurt. He said, after I'd done my little introductory class, he said, come on with me. And I said, okay. He said, you know, I've never done this before, right? He said, yeah. He said, yeah, but you got this, I can tell. So we get on this lift. I am terrified of getting off the lift, you know, because you go up, and I'm more scared as I look. I like, there's trees, like right as soon as you get, how do you get off, you know, like my heart, it's pounding right now. It's like, I don't know how to get off this thing because it looks like you've got to turn pretty quick, and they didn't teach me to turn. All I needed to do was to go straight, and so that's what I did. I got off the lift, and I stopped. You know, and then I went this way, then I went this way, And I looked down the mountain. I thought, Dean? He goes, well, I just thought you might try this. I didn't know what the black diamond meant, I didn't, you know. And so I thought, he's down the hill already because he knows I want to kill him. So, so I thought, how do I get down now? So I thought, I've got a plan, right? And so I went like at a, what would you call that angle there, guys? And so anyway, basically just about horizontal. And then I ran out of ran out of mountain, or I ran into the trees, and I went this way. So it took me like maybe half an hour. I mean, that's all I did. And then I learned how to, and all these people are like, get out of my way! And then I'd have to look up the mountain to make sure I wasn't in the way of somebody who's like going like super duper fast. So I got down pretty well, to where the thought, okay, phew, that's behind me. And so finally I'm like, I can do this now. So I straightened out the skis, and then I started to go really fast. And I was like, now I'm going so fast that I don't know how to stop, and so I'm going, and I realize I'm headed towards like the outdoor cafe, that piece where they, and so I literally yelled, "Look out!" and so then I finally hit the wood from the cafe, and that slowed me down, and and these people are eating their hamburgers, I am not making this up. And this guy comes over, he goes, "Are you okay?" I'm like, "Yeah." He said, "Oh man," he said, "you've got some real," and he used a male euphemism right there. He said, "I've never seen anybody take the bottom of the mountain that fast." He said, "You're fearless." I said, "Yeah, that's me." But as you know, the truth was, I didn't know how to stop, I didn't know how to stop until I ran out of momentum. So I wonder, how many of us can, approach life on the balls of our feet rather than on the heels of our feet? And approach life with a mentality that says, I'm going to go unless I get a no. Amen.